We need a different kind of leadership today in the world. The whole world's crying out for a different kind of leadership in the president, our political leaders, our business leaders, our nonprofit leaders. And I would say that leadership is more conscious. It's purpose-driven. It's not about self-aggrandizement. How much money can I make? How can I get more famous or more powerful? It should be leadership that's basically in service, servant leadership in service to the higher aims of the organization and the better good for everyone.
Welcome to the Business for Good podcast,
a show where we, Paul Shapiro and Toni Okamoto,
spotlight companies making money by helping solve some of the world's most pressing problems.
How many times have you heard people complain that business is the root of all evil, that our environmental and public health crises are basically all the fault of big, bad corporations, that if you want to do good in the world, go work in the charitable or public sector and don't get corrupted by the world of capitalism?
You don't need to look at public opinion polls to know that big business isn't exactly popular in America. Well, John Mackey, co-founder and CEO of Whole Foods Market, is one of the leading voices offering a differing perspective from that worldview, pioneering what he calls conscious capitalism, which we'll let him define in the show, but suffice it to say that John is so into the idea that business can be a force for good in the world that he's co-authored not one, but 2 books on the topic. First, in 2009, Be the Solution, How Entrepreneurs and Conscious Capitalists Can Solve All the World's Problems. And then in 2013, Conscious Capitalism, Liberating the Heroic Spirit of Business, a book that, as John knows, had a big impact on me when I read it.
And there's a brand new book out that he didn't author, but which he did write the foreword for, The Conscious Capitalism Field Guide, Tools for Transforming Your Organization. So without further ado, John, welcome to the Business for Good podcast.
Hi, Paul. Hi, Toni. Thanks for inviting me on.
So obviously, you don't think that all businesses do good in the world, but you do think that many businesses do good, and in fact, that business has the greatest capacity to solve social problems. So John, what's conscious capitalism, and how do you differentiate it from other types of capitalism?
Before I get into defining conscious capitalism, let me make an even more radical statement, which is, I think most businesses do good in the world. I mean, business is the greatest value creator in the world. It creates far more value for people than all the nonprofits and all the governments combined. It's demonstrable if you just see how far the world has come in the last 200 years. A book that I highly recommend people read is Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, which thoroughly documents the incredible progress the world has made, and business has played the leading role in that along with science. So business doesn't have to atone for itself. I like to say business does good, but it could do better. It's good, but we can make it a lot better. We can make it more conscious. We can consciously do good and less of a byproduct of voluntary exchange between people. It basically, as we're more conscious, we can create organizations that help elevate humanity. And that's really the reason why we started conscious capitalism. And conscious capitalism is we basically define it in terms of its 4 pillars, 4 basic principles. The first one being every business has a potential for a higher purpose beyond just making money. The standard stereotype of business is that it only cares about money. Its purpose is to make money. And if you were to go to a cocktail party and ask people what the purpose of business is, 9 times out of 10, they'd say, what do you mean? Purpose of business is to make money for people, to make a profit. But if you think about it a little further, that's kind of an odd answer because, doctors make a lot of money, but that's not their purpose. Doctors' purpose is to heal people. Teachers educate. Architects design buildings. Engineers construct things. All of the professions refer back to some type of value creation they're doing in the world that makes the world a little bit better place. And only business is put in this box, mostly defined by its enemies, as it's all about the money. It's greedy, it's selfish, it's exploitative, and capitalism is evil. And unfortunately, the enemies of business, if you look historically, business has been, it's been attacked throughout the ages. The minorities that were good at business, like the Jews in the West and the Chinese in the East, have been routinely persecuted. run out of countries. Their assets have been confiscated, and they've had to go different places to start over. The intellectuals have never liked commerce. They've always seen it as sort of lowly, something a common tradesman does. The intellectuals haven't liked business. The aristocrats haven't liked it. It's been seen as sort of dirty and not good. And yet it has been commerce that has helped lift humanity out of poverty. And that's what's happening right now. If you go back 200 years ago, 85% of everyone alive lived in abject poverty at less than $1 a day. And now we're down to like 12% of the population of the world lives on less than $1 a day. And we're going to wipe out abject poverty in the next 50 years. It's going to disappear on this planet, provided we continue to allow capitalism to work its magic. So the first one is higher purpose. So business can have this higher purpose that goes beyond just making money. For example, Amazon's higher purpose is to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. Whole Foods' higher purpose is to nurture people and the planet. Google's higher purpose is to organize the world's information and make it readily available and accessible. So probably the companies you most admire have some type of higher purpose. And we see higher purpose very easily in the nonprofit sector. Every nonprofit articulates a purpose or a mission that it's trying to accomplish. What's less known is that business also is created by entrepreneurs who have some kind of passion, some kind of dream they want to realize in the world. And that becomes the purpose of their business. Over time, that purpose gets forgotten, and I'd say the enemies of business stereotype it as just all about the money. So purpose is first. Second, stakeholders. That a business is best seen in terms of creating value for its various stakeholders, which can be different from business to business, but the most common collection of stakeholders, primary stakeholders, would be the customers, the employees, the investors, the suppliers, the communities that business is part of, and in a larger macro sense, the larger environment, which we're all part of, is also, I think, a stakeholder of business. So business tries to create value for each of these stakeholders. And so it's not just creating value for its investors or its shareholders. It's creating values for its customers. It's creating value, jobs, pay, opportunities for growth for its employees. Its suppliers are trading with their organization or business voluntarily. They're getting value creation, or they wouldn't be making the trades. Communities are very dependent on business. It creates jobs. It creates tax revenues. It creates donations. We always know the story of the towns where the factory fails and then the town gets really poor. Business is instrumental to helping communities to prosper and flourish. And so all the stakeholders matter, and a conscious business, conscious capitalism realizes that. And so it says, let's create value consciously for each of these stakeholders, not sort of accidentally, but deliberately. Third, you have a leadership. We need a different kind of leadership today in the world. The whole world's crying out for a different kind of leadership in the president, our political leaders, our business leaders, our nonprofit leaders. And I would say that leadership is more conscious. It's purpose-driven. It's not about self-aggrandizement. How much money can I make? How can I get more famous or more powerful? It should be leadership that's basically in service. Servant leadership in service to the higher aims of the organization and the better good for everyone. And then finally, we need cultures in our organizations, particularly our business organizations or corporations, where we take love out of the closet, where it's hidden away right now, and we create companies that allow human beings to flourish, to reach their highest potential, to learn and grow, where they don't have to check their identity at the door when they come in, only to regain it when they leave. We can create corporations that really allow human beings to self-actualize themselves and reach their highest potential. So purpose, stakeholders, conscious leadership, conscious culture. Those are the 4 pillars of conscious capitalism. And there's a whole movement. I mean, conscious capitalism, we have a nonprofit organization. We have chapters all over the country. And our conscious capitalism now has been translated into a dozen languages. It's becoming a worldwide movement. It's very exciting.
Nice. So to be clear, John, you're not talking about corporate social responsibility, right? Or CSR efforts of big brands that they use to improve their image. You're talking about companies where the very act of them doing good in their business does some good in the world, right?
Yes, that's correct. However, I don't want to just completely dismiss corporate social responsibility. The fact that corporations feel it's important to at least try to be more socially responsible means that they consider that a virtue and they want to have that type of reputation. That's a good thing. I mean, there may be corporate greenwashing, there may be hypocrisy behind that, but as I forget who said it, but hypocrisy is the compliment that vice pays to virtue. And as corporations begin to think being being corporately socially responsible is more important, you'll see that become more important in corporations over time. So I think it's oftentimes, again, reporting up to the PR department, the marketing department, and it's not an authentic, it's not in you might say, the mission or purpose of the company. I think that's the big difference between conscious capitalism and CSR. Is conscious capitalism puts that social responsibility in its higher purpose. It's one of the reasons it exists, to do good in the world, to make the world a better place. Corporate social responsibility acknowledges that's important, but it's more like being grafted on. It's not at the bones. It's not at the root of what the organization's about. That's the difference.
So in addition to the ones you named, like Google, Amazon, and Whole Foods, what are some examples of companies you think are practicing conscious capitalism, and how are they doing it?
I mean, most of the corporations or companies that are practicing conscious capitalism, they're not well known. They're not. And first of all, let me just state for the record that consciousness is on a continuum. It's not like somebody's conscious and somebody else isn't conscious. I mean, our whole lives we're hopefully growing, evolving, becoming more conscious. I know I'm more conscious today than I was 5 years ago, and I hope I'm more conscious 5 years from today than I am today. I hope Whole Foods is a better company in 5 years than it is today. So it's not like it's an either or. You're either conscious or you're not conscious. So there's no perfect companies out there. I mean, any company can be criticized. Just like I've yet to meet the perfect person. I haven't met the perfect nonprofit. I haven't met the perfect politician or the perfect doctor. I sometimes think business is held to an unfair standard of it. If it's not perfect, it's bad or it's evil. And as long as we understand that we're all attempting to evolve and become more conscious over time, including our organizations, we'll have a better measurement stick. But I mean, instead of pointing out famous corporations, I pointed out 3 to start it out. I mean, so many of the most conscious companies I run into are basically entrepreneurial companies that are younger, that are startups, that are basically getting it right from the very beginning. And I could name many, but I mean, you haven't heard of them. And you can just go on to our consciouscapitalism.org website, and you can see a lot of the players that are coming to our conferences, that are showing up, that are attempting to become more conscious. I mean, in every element of our economy, from certain banks to the food industry, there's a ton of it going on there. I mean, if you have somebody creating a farmer's market, that may not be very big in some local town, but that can be a much more conscious business. So I think we look for that consciousness, and that it'll be the generation of millennial entrepreneurs as they build these conscious businesses from scratch and as they scale over time, that will create a much more conscious business world. It's much easier to start a conscious business than it is to convert an older business to become more conscious. Although I will see what I see happening in a lot of cases is you get more visionary leadership coming into some of these mainstream companies, like Indra Nooyi into Pepsi, or Denise Morrison into Campbell's Soup, and they're beginning to change the cultures of those more older and traditional corporations.
Cool. So, John, on a personal level, as a student, you were this hippie who worked in a vegetarian co-op while studying both religion and philosophy in college. You didn't take a single business class during your whole academic career. You weren't exactly the guy who many would have placed bets on to become a businessman, let alone one who'd eventually sell the grocery store he founded for $14 billion. So what happened? How did this vegetarian hippie go to becoming a business titan?
Well, I'm not sure a business titan is the way.
I thought you would object to that. I think many would say it, though.
I mean, I've recounted that story in some detail in another podcast when how I grew it. I think you can find that under Guy Raz, I think is the podcast I did that told kind of the whole food story. We don't have time to do that today, but I mean, basically, I moved into this vegetarian co-op when I was like 23 years old, going to the University of Texas on the longer, 6-year plan to try to get a degree because I was basically just taking electives. And I moved in that co-op, and it was a vegetarian co-op, and I was not vegetarian when I moved in there. But I moved in, and I had my food consciousness awakened. I became a vegetarian. I'd never heard of the word vegan then, but I became a vegetarian. I learned how to cook. I got passionately interested in natural and organic foods. It was like I was on fire for it. I went to work for a small natural food store in Austin called the Good Food Company, and I'd found my path. I didn't know it at the time, but I just like, this is so cool. I'm so interested in food. I'm so interested in everything about it, and then the health aspects of it. And then over time, gradually, my ethical consciousness was more and more awakened to what's happening in food and how it's injuring our planet, injuring animals, and how it needs to be reformed. And that became my life path. And I mean, I started a store, and the first store was called Saferway. Honestly, it was the most idealistic store I could create. It was vegetarian. It didn't sell. We didn't sell any sugar. We didn't sell any white flour. We didn't sell any alcohol. We didn't even sell any coffee or caffeine. It was really, really pure. We had an office, and we slept on a futon, took showers in the Hobart dishwasher at night. We weren't supposed to be living there, but that's what we could afford. So that was a romantic time, I suppose, as I look back on it. But after about 2 years, Saferway was losing money. It wasn't making any money. It was too pure. It was way ahead of where the market was. There just weren't enough vegetarians in Austin who didn't consume sugar or coffee or alcohol, and our competitors all had those products. So we decided, if we're not going to go out of business, we relocated, went to a bigger store, merged with another store, changed the name to Whole Foods Market because they didn't want our name and we didn't want their name. And we loosened up. We began to sell coffee and beer and wine and white flour and sugar, and we began to sell some animal foods as well. Although I was still a vegetarian, we began to try to sell the foods that we really thought our customers wanted to buy while keeping the natural, organic, or high-quality standards, no artificial ingredients, flavorings, colorings, and preservatives. That seemed to be the sweet spot back in 1980 because that store exploded. Within just a few months, it was the highest volume natural food store in the United States, and it had taken off. And we had a flood 9 months after we opened, which that's been well documented or talked about, and that forced us to do a second store, and then a second store led to a third store, and eventually we raised venture capital money, and then eventually went public, and we just kept growing the business because it's what the market wanted. It was the time had come for a natural food supermarket that sold really healthy food to people.
And for anyone who's interested in the longer version of that story, you do I loved hearing it in Conscious Capitalism, so I'll put that in the show notes as well. It's now been a year since you sold Whole Foods to Amazon. As a consumer, one thing I've noticed is lower prices, which is definitely important to me. But from the CEO's perspective, how's the new marriage going?
The marriage has been going great. I mean, you should completely disregard everything you read in the paper about it because Whole Foods never talks about the merger to the media, and neither does Amazon. So it's always frustrating to me when I read these things about team members are upset or suppliers are upset or it's just stuff they're just gossip. They're just making it up. Or they're talking to people who have left the company and are angry about something one way or another. But there's been no systematic investigation because they're incapable of doing it. They don't have access. And so the media, there's a market for people wanting to believe the merger's not going well. And so that's why the media keeps writing about it, because they get click-throughs on it. But in fact, the merger's going extremely well. And the marriage is the metaphor I use internally at Whole Foods to get people to understand it, because we understand things through metaphors. And marriage is a pretty good metaphor for this merger, because it's a conscious merger. We've gone into it with our eyes wide open. And I mean, I've told the story about how when I first met with Jeff Bezos and his team, and how it was kind of love at first sight. We really connected, we really clicked. Their passion towards customers, their passion towards creating the long term really synced up well with Whole Foods. Their creativity, their innovation, these are things that Whole Foods also values. And we just started talking about the things we could do together, that way we could create or recreate the food system over time. And it was like, oh my God, this is it for Whole Foods. This is where we need to go next. This is how we will best fulfill our highest purpose in partnership with Amazon. And so we were under pressure from shareholder activists. I was very concerned that the company was going to be forcefully sold to another supermarket chain that would not get us at all, would ruin our culture, ruin our values. And Amazon was clearly the best partner for us. So we kind of fell in love with them, and like a marriage, we had a whirlwind romance. And 6 weeks after that first meeting, we were engaged, meaning we'd signed a merger agreement. And 2 months after that, we consummated the marriage. It completed August 28th, 2017. And since then, it's been like a marriage. I mean, in my experience, when in a merger, Whole Foods had bought 23 other companies, so I'd been on the other side of it quite a few times. I mean, we only knew each other for 6 weeks, and we had chaperones. We couldn't really talk too much about strategy and things like that. That was forbidden by the government. So a lot of it's been getting to know each other after we got married. And it's like any relationship. If it's going to be a healthy one, there's a me. These are things that are important to us. There's a you. These are the things that are important to you. And then there's the we, the shared self that we're creating together. And so Amazon has been very respectful of Whole Foods Market's purpose, our values, what we're trying to create in the world. And in a lot of ways, they're just helping us to be better. And at the same time, Whole Foods is learning a lot from Amazon. I mean, I've learned more in the last 10 months since this deal went through than the last several years combined. It's been a very rapid learning curve, very exciting for me, because I've been doing it for 40 years, and to learn so many new things in the first year is incredibly exciting for me. But I mean, here's the thing, that it's like any relationship. I mean, do I absolutely love everything about Amazon? I don't love everything about them. I don't love everything about my wife. I mean, I love about 98%, but there's like 2% that kind of bugs me. And there are differences. But the thing and that's what the people tend to focus on, are the differences. But the dominant narrative is that this is a really good marriage, a really good merger. And basically on all the most important things, we're syncing up very well. And the things that we have differences about, we discuss them, and Whole Foods pushes back when it's necessary and important to do so. And Amazon's has been good listeners, and they've given us the space we need to stay who we are. So all in all, honestly, I couldn't be happier. Our sales, I'll also say our sales are way up. I mean, it's been really good. The price cuts, we knew we needed to cut our prices at Whole Foods, but as a public company, when you cut prices initially, your sales go down because you're not. If you're selling something for $1 and you cut it to 90 cents, well, now you're only getting 90 cents of sales versus $1. And we just, as a public company, every quarter we had to meet earnings expectations. We couldn't take the long-term view. We were kind of in a trap. And Amazon kind of helped us out of that trap by letting us think long-term again. And so we've had a couple of rounds of price cuts. We've done the Amazon credit card gives people 5% off when they shop at Whole Foods. Now the Prime program at Whole Foods, that for Prime members are getting really, really good deals. So we're doing a lot to kind of throw away the whole paycheck narrative. And And if the last thing I do at Whole Foods is dump that narrative, I will have considered I will consider it a successful career. So there'll be other price reductions as we go along. So, and that's one of the things I love about Amazon. They're helping us get better. They're helping us lower our prices. They're helping us be a much better company. They're helping us fulfill our highest purpose.
That's something I very much appreciate, and I think my audience at Plant Based on a Budget really appreciates. I go in there and I show how cheap those bananas are. Really great prices. So about a decade ago, you decided to stop taking a paycheck from Whole Foods and would donate your stock portfolio. Why did you feel that that was important at the time? And do you ever have regrets about it? Do you ever think, man, I could have had more cash to engage in personal philanthropy and impact investing?
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to understand. I mean, to really explain it, I'll just say that I'm a guy who's always been about following my heart, following my passion, following my higher purpose. That's been my strategy in life, and it's worked really, really well. And back in 2006, I just knew the right thing for me to do was to stop taking compensation so that everybody could clearly see that it wasn't about the money for me. It was about the higher purpose. And I donated the stock options I would have received. I just had donated to the Whole Foods Market Foundations. And I had enough money. I mean, one of the important things to know in life, which many people never figure out, is how much is enough? I have enough. And I have enough for myself, my wife, my friends, my family. I have enough to be philanthropic. Could I have been richer? Yeah, I could have been a lot richer. But so what? I'm plenty rich and I have enough. And in terms of I'd have more to give away, all I can say is that's true, but it was the right thing for me to do. And I don't have any regrets about it. It was the right decision. It's still the right decision.
So, John, I know you said that there are some topics that you don't discuss publicly, like let's say GMOs, for example. But I don't think that one of those topics is labor. So let me ask you, you've made it clear that you're not exactly a fan of unions, but still Whole Foods has year after year been rated as one of the best places to work. So why is that? And do you think that the idea of all unions, including company unions as opposed to general labor unions, is a bad one?
Well, first of all, company unions are illegal in the United States. I don't know if you know that or not, but they're illegal. You have to have third-party representation, or it's considered illegal. United States is one of the few countries in the world that doesn't allow company unions. Contrast that with Japan.
Sorry to interrupt you, John. Just for listeners who aren't familiar, what's the difference between a company union and a traditional labor union in the U.S.?
A company union would be, say, the company and the employees together create a union, and they work out these issues and problems. So that is illegal. It can't be called a union in the United States. That's a company union. It's illegal. What you only can do in the United States is if you want to have a union, you have to have third party representation. So somebody from the outside, like the Teamsters or the United Commercial Food Workers or some other type of union, will come in and represent the employees in their negotiations with the company, so that it creates this third party, which oftentimes creates an adversarial relationship. So, look, I don't have anything against unions. The unions keep saying I'm anti-union, but I'm not really anti-union. I mean, I believe in freedom. If people want to have a labor union, then they can have one. I mean, that's their choice. It's legally protected in the United States. And do I think that'd be the best thing for Whole Foods? No. Do I really want our team members to do that? No. That would mean that they feel deeply alienated from our company and don't trust us enough to be able to work out our problems together. So, but sometimes unions are necessary. Unions have played an important historical role. I'm not against unions, so I kind of want to get that clear because that keeps getting repeated. So that's become the narrative, although I keep denying it.
Okay. Well, thanks for clearing it up here. So, just quickly though, to the point of Whole Foods being named as like one of the best places to work, what is it that you attribute that to? Like, what are the policies there that you think make it one of the best places to work?
I mean, I don't think that's a simple answer that you can kind of sum up in a sentence or two or a soundbite, because cultures are rich. what I would say is, like I talked about stakeholders, that Whole Foods Market tries to create value for all the stakeholders. So one of the core values in Whole Foods Market is one of the very, our 7 core values. One of them is we create team member happiness and growth. We want our team members to be happy. We believe when our team members are happy, they're going to give better service to our customers, and that's going to result in the business flourishing and prospering. So that's very important to us. That's always been important to Whole Foods. We create a culture where we want our team members to be happy. We work at it. We measure it. If they're not happy, if they're, it's not, you can't make anybody happy. People have to some extent choose it, but we can create the conditions that allow human beings to flourish. So part of that is letting people be more authentic, be themselves when they're at work. Whole Foods is never, personal appearance is something that we've always, we're started by a bunch of hippies, so we're very tolerant of dress or piercings or tattoos or whatever, people that's their own identity. We don't care about the things that, we just really believe in that individual liberty for people to be themselves. And that's always been magnetic for many team members. And we don't try to basically create a culture where we're ordering everybody around. We have a culture of empowerment. We're organized into teams. We think people have a strong tribal need to be part of tribes. So we create that type of feeling in our stores. And we don't try to manage through fear. We're not, people oftentimes say it feels really good when I come into the stores. There's a lot of reasons that feeling good is there, but one of them is that our team members fundamentally aren't afraid all the time. I think those are some of the things we do. And we're also a mission-driven, purpose-driven company, and many team members who come to work for us identify with our food mission. And we attract people that are into natural foods. We attract foodies. We attract vegans. We attract people that are just totally into food. And so they flourish in a company that's very much into food.
Whole Foods has a lot of unconventional policies, from having department members vote on whether they want to keep new hires after an initial probationary period, capping the executive to low-level employee pay ratio, and more. But perhaps one of the most interesting policies is your belief in salary transparency, that every employee can look up how much every other employee makes. What do you think the benefit is of that? And do you recommend that for other companies, especially others that haven't practiced salary transparency in the past?
Do I recommend it? I don't know. I think it's, every culture, every company, or every organization has to figure out what's best for them. I wish more people experimented with it. And basically, you have to understand that one of the most powerful human emotions that is just there, it's in our DNA, it's in our nature, but it's such an ugly emotion that it basically goes into disguise, and that emotion is envy. And a lot of the people that are fighting for justice or righteously indignant about inequality, a lot of that, not all of it, but some of it is driven by envy. And envy is endemic in any type of tribal configuration. Any type of organization has to deal with envy. It's so powerful because people compare their own place in the hierarchy, their own compensation, their own benefit package. And if somebody's getting a better deal and they don't think they deserve it, then they don't think that's fair. And that sense of fairness is very, very important. So one of the big advantages of having a transparency in wages is that, the envy is like, you don't eliminate envy, but you show people in a transparent way what somebody else is getting paid. Because most of the time people suspect wrongly that everybody's making more money than they are, or that somehow or another the whole thing is unfair and unjust. But by being able to make transparency about it, you see what type of jobs are the highest paid in an organization, what people should be striving for if they want to move up and take more responsibility and get promoted, what they can expect to get paid. It also shows that generally in a team, there's very little difference in the pay. It's mostly based on how long you've worked there. And then team leaders are going to make more, and store team leaders are going to make more than that. And so there's a certain rationale in the hierarchy in it. And I think by having that transparency, it gives comfort that overall the compensation system in Whole Foods market is it's fair and it's relatively egalitarian. We don't have, we also cap it at 19 times the average pay. So that has been a deep part of our culture for a long time, and that's why we do it. And yeah, I mean, we've done it since almost the beginning, so it wasn't something we had to evolve into. But is that the right thing for other companies to do? I don't know. Can't say for others, just for what works best for Whole Foods.
So, John, just thinking about aspiring entrepreneurs who might be listening, and a lot of them are excited about the explosion of venture capital funds that are willing to invest in first-time business people now. It's very different from when you started Whole Foods, the amount of VC money there is available for first-time entrepreneurs. You've joked before that venture capitalists are kind of like hitchhikers. Do you want to elaborate on that? And what do you mean by calling them hitchhikers? Well,
I think it's a pretty good metaphor. It's hitchhikers with credit cards. And so, I mean, they jump in the car, and as long as you take them where they want to get to, they have an exit, right? They don't want to stay in your company forever. They're willing to invest, and they're going to hitchhike along on your as you grow as an organization. They're going to go along for the ride. And as long as you take them to where they want to get to, they'll help pay for the gas. They provide the gas money that you need to grow the organization. However, if you wander off, if you get a little lost, you don't get them to where they want to get to, they hijack the car and throw you out on the side of the road and hire a new driver. And so that's why I think it's a good metaphor. As long as you understand these aren't your friends, they are hitchhikers. They'll help you get to where you want to get to, and you can help them get to where they want to get to. But and that's the way it was with Whole Foods. We got our hitchhikers, our VCs got to where they wanted to get to, and we went public, and they had their exit. They made a lot of money, and they were very happy about it. But if we had not been able to do that, then they probably take over Whole Foods.
So a lot of folks listening who might be inspired either to start their own consciously capitalistic company or join one, or maybe even help their current employer aspire to a higher purpose. You may not have taken any business classes, John, but you've run a multi-billion-dollar business for decades, and I've heard you say before that you've read something like 1,000 books on business. So for anybody listening who wants to get more involved, what resources, books or otherwise, would you recommend to people who want to use business to do good in the world?
I mean, I don't know if I've read 1,000 books. I haven't counted them, but I've certainly read several hundred books over the years, for sure, about business. But, it's like when you get interested in something. When I got interested in food, when I moved from that co-op, I just devoured information. I have a hunger for knowledge, and so I want to understand how things work. So since I didn't have any business background, I didn't take any business courses, I just started reading everything I could find. But a lot of the books that I read in the 1970s and 1980s, 1990s are way out of date now. And I don't read as many business books as I used to. But I'll recommend one, particularly for entrepreneurs, because it's one of the best books I ever read. And I just read it a couple of years ago. It's Phil Knight's, the founder of Nike's, kind of his memoirs. It's called Shoe Dog. It is a tremendously great read. And it just tells that mostly it's about the early days of Nike and how he did it on a shoestring, how he held on to ownership, how he got the Japanese screwed him. And that's how he ended up changing his company from just selling tigers and he had a totally different brand, to changing the name of the company to Nike and building one of the greatest brands in the world today. It's a great, great story. I do like reading books about entrepreneurs. And I just read, a recent book I read was Upstarts, which was by Brad Stone, which is a book about Airbnb and Uber, kind of how those sharing economy businesses got going. So I read everything by Peter Drucker in my formative years. That was very important. And I just go to the bookstore, and if there were business books, I'd buy them, I'd read them. And so many of them have taught me a few things. And And then so ultimately reading books about Amazon or Google or those companies can be very inspiring. Also, I recommend reading Warren Buffett. His biography, Snowball, is a tremendously good read, and you'll learn a lot about business by just reading about how Buffett thinks about it. So those are some recommendations. I'll pitch Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker again, because that's the book I've just finished reading that shows the great progress the world is making, and particularly that there's such a doom and gloom narrative out there. But in truth, this is the best time it's ever been in the history of humanity to be alive. There's less poverty. There's more progress. In the millennials, there's such a fear that the world's getting worse, but it's not. It's getting better. And people need to know that. There's real reason to be optimistic and not in despair.
So, John, let me ask you one quick question as we're reaching the end, but I just want to ask you, so it does seem pretty indisputable to me that it may be the best time to be a human in the history of humanity today, for a lot of people at least. But do you think that's true for animals in terms of the world becoming a better place?
No, I don't. I think it's not the best time to be an animal, for sure. Paul, this is something you and I obviously have a great passion and we share together. And I'm deeply disturbed. I actually think that I always find it ironic that so many people today condemn the founding fathers, they were slaveholders, or they look back on the past with judgment because the consciousness was different 100 years ago or 200 years ago than it is today. And it's easy to feel sort of like those people were so awful. But what they don't realize is that people are going to look back on this era today in probably less than 100 years, in 50 years, and they're going to be horrified, absolutely horrified with how animals were treated. And animals of all types. Animals have been completely exploited, particularly livestock animals. And I mean, we slaughter almost 10 billion animals a year for food in the United States. And 99% of them had terrible lives in factory farms. It is a real ethical failing. But it's easier to see the flaws of the past than to see the flaws today. So no, it's not the best time alive to be an animal, except that we are waking up. We are becoming more conscious. We're beginning to make changes. And that's why I think in 50 years, it's going to be a lot better life for animals than it is today.
Finally, John, in Conscious Capitalism, you recommend keeping a gratitude journal where you can write down a few things for which you're grateful at the end of each day. Do you want to close us out here and offer a few things for which you're grateful?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I'm just grateful to be alive. I mean, it's extraordinarily amazing to be a living being, to have a body, to have senses, to be able to move in this. The universe is so amazing. It's incredible. And to just be able to walk around in it, to move in it, to smell it, to taste it, to feel it, to see it, to love it. I'm so grateful just to be alive. And then, of course, I'm grateful for how fortunate I am. I have good health. I have I have people I love. I'm in a committed marriage for 28 years. I love so many people. I'm so grateful to have been privileged to build Whole Foods and be part of that, because some of the people I love most in the world have shared that journey with me for decades and decades now. And I'm so grateful to have friends and the kindnesses people do for me. I'm so grateful that I've had a chance to be able to serve and help other people. And so, hey, those are a few things that popped in my brain, but they pop into my brain regularly.
Well, folks, there you have it. John Mackey, CEO of Whole Foods Market, on what he's grateful for on venture capitalists, labor unions, Amazon, and of course, how to do good in the world via business. So, John, thanks so much for coming on to Business for Good. We are truly grateful for your time.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Tony. Hope you guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you. You too. All right, folks, thanks so much for listening to the show.
We hope you got a lot out of it and that you will show us some love. You can rate Business for Good as 5 stars on iTunes, support us on Patreon, and tell your friends interested in business, or really just in making the world a better place, about the show.
And we'd love to hear what you're thinking. Please feel free to contact us anytime via our website, businessforgoodpodcast.com.
And as always, we hope that you will be in the business of doing good.